To find out more about Cuba's millennials and how they're changing the country, we're joined now by Cristina Escobar. She's a journalist and joins us live from Havana. Cristina, I want to really focus on the millennials who are choosing to stay in Cuba. Many are doing what they want within certain boundaries. Some are becoming entrepreneurs, perhaps things that were not possible 10, 15 years ago. So what do you believe is behind this remarkable shift?
Well, I think that definitely millennials are playing a huge role in Cuba. Not only because around 30% of the private sector is essentially provided and promoted and made and executed by youngsters, by millennials, but also because in the state-run sector, they're extremely essential. In biotechnological industry here in Cuba, which is high-tech technology, basically the vast majority of people that makes this are young people. So we have a starting role right now in Cuba as another example that I can give you in this change is Cuban journalism. When I entered into journalism, political coverage, just to give you an example, was made by older men, although in Cuba journalism is essentially made by women. But political coverage was focused on older men. Now it's essentially made by younger people. The U.S.-Cuba relation change also has created a new way to focus this controversy between the two countries. And so state-run media, public media in Cuba is also changing, I would say, essentially because of the push of the younger generation. Even the access to internet, when it was a political decision whether to open up or not, what younger people believed about it was essential. It was a pressure onto the decision makers to actually create more opportunity into going into internet, which is now part of our reality.
But Cristina, as we saw in Michael Voss's report, there are some who are still leaving Cuba.
Yes, of course, that's a reality. Less than years ago, but it's because now, for example, with the private sector, there's more opportunity, although these private sector opportunities are not around professional jobs. So if you are an engineer, it's pretty hard to find a work as an engineer, if not impossible, in the private sector. Still is a non-professional kind of work, although it's more lucrative, you can make more money than working for the state-run sector. And of course, there are people migrating. Migration in Cuba is not something that is happening now. It's been happening since we are a nation, and essentially to the U.S. Although right now, the tendency to go to the U.S. has diminished tremendously because of the changes between Cuba and the U.S., the lift of the policy of wet food, dry food policy, and of course, because now you can't even ask for a U.S. visa in Havana. So a lot of the younger generation and millennials are trying to find alternatives to live in Cuba. If you ask any Cuban, as Michael Voss did, they want to stay in Cuba. They want to make a living in Cuba. They want to stay with their families. And if they go, it's because they can't make a living here, or at least they can't get as much as they're giving to the society through their state-run sectors. We do have a great education, for example, so you can be a nuclear engineer, but you don't have a thermonuclear in Cuba. So this is just an example of how complicated this is. And in this sense, of course, a lot of young people, like it's happening in Spain, like it's happening in Central America, are choosing to leave.
Well, you know, we saw recently President Barack Obama's historic trip to Cuba. We saw the opening of the U.S. Embassy after many years. We saw a concert by the Rolling Stones. A number of celebrities from Madonna to Beyonce have also visited Cuba. How much do you believe these high-profile visits have really energized the Cubans?
Well, it's always a nice news, and it's exciting to have all these relevant pop stars and stars in general. Obama is a rock star in Cuba, I can tell you that for sure. But definitely it's always a good news for Cubans. But we're so into the American culture. It's part of our own culture. I grew up listening to American music, watching American movies. It's part of my reality. In Cuba, the sense of progress, the sense of being developed, of being advanced, is around American culture. So, and we're not less Cubans because of that. So, having the Rolling Stones over there doesn't mean we're less Cubans. Having Barack Obama over that doesn't mean we're less Cubans. Although there are people here, let's say, with a different mentality, that do believe that this, in a way, risk or put into risk being Cuban, or what means sovereignty, or what means being revolutionary in Cuba today, or being attached to the revolutionary ideas. But I personally believe we had a lot of fun with Rolling Stones. We had a lot of fun doing a lot of things related to Madonna or Beyonce coming to, or having Fast and Furious filmed in Havana streets, and it was fun. It was a pleasant surprise to have them here. But I don't think that's going to change. We watch Fast and Furious.
Understood.
We listen to Madonna.
Okay.
It's part of our reality, and welcoming them is just great.
All right. I wish we had more time, but we have to leave it there. Cristina Escobar, live for us in Havana. Thank you.